Yo, Pokey26 here, and today I wanted to talk about the gas arrow explosion build, or whatever else you want to call it. Basically, gas arrow followed by something to ignite, such as flame wall. And yeah, you may have seen this build already before, but I want to talk about how it's been going for me, and also a bit about a potential energy shield variant that I'm going to likely transition to at some point in order to have a higher effective health pool or hit pool or whatever you want to call it, since it's not really health. You get the idea. Anyways, as you can see, I'm like level 77 in hardcore SSF right now, so it's been going okay. I did lose a level 76 playing the same build already, but yeah. As you can see, this is like the current version I have. Pretty straightforward. I think this is fairly common layout for what people go for when they're playing this build. You know, you get your attack speed, your evasion, a little bit of area, projectile damage, and so on. And the big focus on, of course, move speed, a lot of move speed. After this point, for the evasion version of this build, which this is currently, there's not much more to currently go for without like branching far off somewhere else, right? Like this is basically the treat, and you get here and you're good, and then you're like, well, what do I do now? You know, you could go up here to Kite Runner, but it's pretty far traveling. You could grab some of these like High Alert and Blinding Strike, you know, this little section here. If you want extra move speed and attack speed, you can go over to Adrenaline Rush. You know, there's options, but none of them are like super efficient or close or like good per se. They're like okay, right? But there's not much more to go, and you don't exactly get much tankier. Like if you take some big hits, you're probably just going to eventually die to them, right? So it's a little sketchy in hardcore scenarios, and that's why I want to talk more about an energy shield variant. So, yeah, currently, you know, these are the basic gems. Very very simple. You probably know most of these already. I'm not going to go too into depth on them, especially with some of the supports on some of them, but yeah. Basically, Flame Wall you want at least, like Arcane Tempo. Persistence and Spell Cascade both help a bit. Fire Exposure for Solar Orb is pretty nice. I'm not actually sure what other gems to put here. Maybe I had something in my... I think I have a second gem equipped currently, but anyways, the point is you at least want the Fire Exposure. That's kind of the goal here, is so that Solar Orb applies that for bossing. You know, we got Heightened Curse, Focus Curse for Flammability. Holy Descent and Frost Nexus is... I use Frost Nexus at least, but you can use one of the other freezing ones, like increased freeze duration type thing if you prefer something like that. Yeah. I also use a low level escape shot, so I'm not sure if something like Frost Nexus even matters, because I'm probably not proccing a freeze. But that makes the mana cost lower. Ideally I would use a higher level one eventually though. And then Wind Dancer, of course. But when you're going to the Energy Shield version, that's where you now get Ghost Dance and Grim Feast instead of something like, let's say, Herald of Ash, right? And Shield Charge Barrage, kind of optional for extra efficiency. But you know, if you want to keep it a bit more simple, you definitely don't need to use those. You probably know most of these gems already: Scattershot, Martial Tempo, Primal Armament, Magnified Effect. You can switch Magnified Effect for Concentrated Effect for bossing. You can also use Concentrated Effect in general if you're having mana trouble, but I'm not sure how good that is in particular. It doesn't have a multiplier on it compared to the 1.2 or 120% multiplier for Magnified Effect. I think Rising Tempest also has a 120 multiplier. But Concentrated Effect does not have a multiplier, so it makes it easier mana-wise if you really need to, but you'd prefer to not clear with that. So I don't know if it's actually good to do that, or if it's better to just suffer through the mana problems instead. Yeah, you get the idea. But more so than the gems, I want to talk about the passive tree I've been looking at doing. So here, let me get this centered better, or more visible. Okay, so this is my basic outline, but there is a lot of room for improvement, and that's the beauty of a new game, and you know, just new stuff to work with here, right? So obviously this takes a lot from my previous tree and then just expands upon it to make it more energy shield evasion based instead of just pure energy shield, instead of just pure evasion, I mean. So the biggest problem I see here is satisfying the stat requirements, you know, evasion and energy shield. I'm not totally sure exactly what sort of gear you'd want in every slot. It might be hybrid bases. You might just go evasion, energy shield in all slots, and then you would still need a lot of dex in the long run if you're looking to get the top end bow, for instance, like the dual string bow, etc. Yeah, that's kind of the point of this. I liked keeping this because I think these stat points matter a lot if you want to get stat points in the long run. So you get the 8% dexterity, you get the 25, the 8, the 8, and then these as well with attack speed come another 15 dex. So, you know, you're looking here at what, 56 dex and another 8%, which is probably going to be another 15 in the long run for what you're going for a total. So what did I say it was? Yeah, it's like 70 dex just for these nodes here, which helps a ton for satisfying the requirements you need. And then you also have at least the 10 dex here, and you know, another 5 dex. This as well 10 dex, although I've been considering so this is, you know, the tree I've been looking at, of course, but I do think there is potential to cut certain pieces. Like I could cut this section here. Oh, why did it kind of bug out? That's weird. Okay, there we go. Yeah, anyways. Like I was saying, I was thinking of cutting that section there because you don't really want pure evasion nodes too much. You do lose out on a little dex and the move speed, but the move speed nodes as well are a bit inefficient, you know, grabbing 2 nodes for 4% move speed. Good for clearing and farming, but probably bad in the long run. This as well, I'm not totally sure of what to think of. You know, I think you definitely want at least this 2-point node to get there if you're pathing down here anyways. But there is some difference there. And then this bottom section, I do think is pretty worthwhile. There's a lot of good stuff here, right? Like you probably want this for the 5% fizz taken as a random element. You probably want this for just generic damage increase, chance to maim, and more importantly, a little bit of move speed on top of it. Like, it's just all around decent. The fletching, of course, with the prod speed helping to apply to damage allows you to get that on things like your quiver for extra damage. But I could see cutting this section. If I was going to cut a section, it would probably be this section here, because it's a lot of points. But these points are fairly decent, so you'd rather keep it if you can. And then this section is really good. bunch of skill speed and move speed. So this definitely looks solid here. Like I said, this section is questionable, the evasion section. So I could see cutting that. And then here, I'm actually totally not sure about subterfuge mask either. So this one is evasion based on ES on the helmet, but I'm not actually sure if you would go for a full energy shield helmet to begin with. Honestly, I might have to look more into it about what the stat requirements would be, but it might be better to just go a evasion energy shield hybrid or something like that, and then maybe this isn't even worth it, right? It's a lot of extra points out of the way. So I'm not totally sure on this, and I could at least see cutting it early until you're higher level. And when you're higher level, maybe you can fit the stat requirements easier. Maybe it's actually worthwhile. But yeah, this is definitely potentially cuttable as well, which is going to be another 6 points. And if you cut those 6 points, suddenly instead of being a level 100 tree, which is unrealistic currently, you're looking at a level like 87 or something tree. Is that right? I think like 87 tree. So yeah. Other than that, there's small things that can be cut here. The 3% attack speed here. This one can definitely be cut. I do think it would be cool to add cold damage, similar to the reason why you would add the lightning damage. You want the lightning damage for shock, which is huge, but you kind of would not hate having cold damage as well for potential freeze and so on. But I don't know if it's actually worth, because you're already going to be stunning just through the initial fizz damage hit to begin with. So that might also be worth cutting. It is just 2 points, but 2 points is 2 points, sorry. There's definitely other valuable places to put it. So now this tree is looking a lot more realistic for the level. I do like the kite runner node. It does require a lot of pathing points though along this side to do that. And then of course, I think some of these are decent up here. You could cut this section as well. It's an option, but these look decent. They're okay. I don't know if it's totally worth going up there. It is a lot of points for this section, but another section that is cuttable. Basically something you would look to going into late game, but you kind of decide at that point like what works best. So before that point, you might cut that section there, and then the rest of the tree might be your like level 70 or so tree. Like what is this? Yeah, like this might be your level 73 tree, right? And that's very realistic. Like my character is level 77, so I could literally switch my tree to like this right now, and then I have a few leftover points to fit where I want. That being said, I have thought of other pathing. Particularly with this, you could go here instead and go through here. This allows you to potentially grab Blinding Strike if you want. You could now cut this section here as well, right? There's ways to do this. You could cut this, or you could cut this part and put this back. Different ways to go about it. You could honestly, if you really wanted to, you could cut this whole dexterity section completely, but I find it hard to figure out how you would satisfy the stat requirements you need if you're cutting that. Unless it's like, you actually have super good gear for it. Once you have super good gear, sure, maybe you can cut all that, or once you have like lower requirements or whatever the case may be. But otherwise, currently, this is what I would look at. And like I said, there's multiple pathings here. You can go this path. You can go these 4 instead of these 4. If you're not going these 4, you could even cut Kite Runner. So I could show that, I guess. You know, you could put these back. And then you could cut this. You could even cut Kite Runner, like I said, and then just anoint Kite Runner if you wanted, for instance. And, you know, maybe you have something like this instead, right? This seems pretty reasonable. This is like level, what, 76 or so? It looks pretty solid. You know, maybe you'd have these projectile nodes early and switch them to attack speed later. But yeah, it looks decent. There is still some merit to coming down to this bottom side. Like, I do think this exploit node is decent. Catapult is really good section, especially if you're grabbing feathered fletching. Like if you're getting the projectile speed bonus, this has extra merit for the projectile speed being a 15% damage increase on top of the area that you're getting, and the area is pretty nice. You know, because it's what, 31% area for this section. So I could see coming over here as well. Whether it be, you know, whether you go something like this and then you know, something like this. This is reasonable, but like I said, I'm not totally sure how worth it is to grab all these damage nodes when you might actually be wanting to invest more into the evasion energy shield nodes that you can, so that it's worthwhile to do the energy shield variant, right? Which is why I was considering, instead of some of this damage and area, what if we head over here as well? You know, if we're not doing Inner Faith up here that I originally had, maybe we're over here like dampening shield or something, and you know, something like this. It feels kind of weird to go way over here, but you know, it's an option. You could grab melding as well, something like this. I'm not sure if this is worth more than just grabbing. I think you would probably prefer grabbing energy shield evasion hybrid nodes, but this is, like I said, another variant that I could see working depending on just how much energy shield you have to work with. But yeah. Anyways, like I said, there's just some ideas getting thrown out there by me and what I've been looking at. My current version would be more like this, I would say. Yeah, maybe switch this side back to Kite Runner, because I do kind of want to run Kite Runner, but yeah. And then I prefer to not go this section, but I could see this section. Still unsure on Subterfuge. It would be probably like the last nodes you would grab. But like realistically, I think this is what I would be looking at, like level 85. So like 8 more levels from what I'm currently at. And I think this would be reasonable, you know? Or maybe even cut that 84. It's a lot of, it's still a decent amount of damage. There's a lot of attack speed here. You know, you're getting some attack speed here, getting attack speed here, and reduce caustic skills, which can be pretty important with the mana cost being pretty high. Need some defenses here with Fizzes taken as element. More attack speed, move speed, more move speed, attack damage, attack speed. Like, there's good stuff everywhere here, right? Yeah, this section here in the middle, definitely something I'm still questioning. Like, I think ideally you would probably cut this section, the dexterity section. But it feels difficult to do that until, like I said, you have really good gear to do so, right? You need some way to satisfy all your stat requirements, and this is one way to do that. So currently I would have this, but late game late game. Okay, maybe I should show that tree. Once you get everything fixed, maybe something more like this, and then you could just cut this completely, right? That's a pretty good tree as well. You lose a bunch of the dex, but if you can fit the dex and int, because you need both now if you're going hybrids, I think this looks pretty good. Anyways, let me know what your thoughts are on this sort of build, where you would differ from it, and you know, like what you would change, what you like about it, what you dislike. And yeah, I just thought I would put it out there with what I've been thinking of and see if I actually get to this point if my character doesn't die, right? Anyways, stay safe out there, Exiles.